So today we will be creating a Sylus fanfiction because it is a great way to practice writing and because I want to. Fanfiction has a lot of negative connotations to it. It can be seen as childish or creepy or just obsessive to those outside of the fandom, but fanfiction isn't as uncommon or childish as people may think. There are actually plenty of examples of professional fanfiction. If you think about it, Wicked is actually Wizard of Oz fan fiction. It is just told from the point of view of someone else. One of my personal favorites is a play called Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, which is a spin-off basically of two of the side characters in Shakespeare's Hamlet. Anything related to Sherlock Holmes is completely fan fiction, whether it's TV shows or movies, all based on the tales of Sir Conan Arthur Doyle. I can't say his name. I could say Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, but I couldn't say Sir Conan Arthur Doyle. And of course, if you play video games, I am sure you have seen the multitude of books that spin off from those video games, such as BioShock and Assassin's Creed, and of course the 35 plus books of Halo. All of these are technically commercial fan fiction. So fan fiction really isn't as negative as people think it is. It's just maybe because a lot of beginners do fan fiction, it might have negative connotations because these are a lot of beginning writers. So of course, it's not going to be up to commercial fiction snuff. And a lot of the times, fan fiction can just be dirty. But considering the commercial fiction that's around now, but besides that, a lot of the books that I write also are based on Otome fiction. I have a bachelor's degree in video game design, and I really love video games because it is such a great medium for storytelling. And not only that, but it's really immersive as well. So I get really inspired when I play games like Legend of Zelda or Harvest Moon or Final Fantasy. Let me give you a few reasons why you should try your hand at fanfiction. The first reason is the world is already built for you. So world building can take up a lot of time, and people normally just kind of get swept up into world building so much that they don't ever get to the writing part. And while world building is fun and an important part of storytelling, it's not the most important part of storytelling. So fan fiction is great because the world is already built for you, so you don't have to spend a lot of time doing any sort of world building. And in addition to the world being built, the characters are also built for you as well. This means that you don't have to spend a lot of time building characters, and you get to practice character consistency. This is actually a very important skill. You put an already made character into a situation, and then based on what you know about that character, you determine how they will react to that situation. This is different if you're creating your own character and you don't have a lot of experience doing so, because what ends up happening is maybe you put your character in a situation and you write how you would react to the situation. Or you write like an extreme reaction that doesn't match your character at all. So if the characters are pre-made for you, you get to practice this character consistency of how would someone with this personality react to this sort of situation. It's a really great practice for fiction, and I highly recommend it. Another thing about fan fiction is it's very low pressure. So because it kind of has a reputation for just being beginner writing, some of it really good, some of it trash, you don't have to worry so much about writing commercial grade fiction. Fan fiction is basically an experimental playground, so you can go ahead and write a whole bunch of trash if you want to. You don't even have to share it with anybody. It's just a great way to work on your craft and work on different elements of the writing craft without trying to meet some genre expectations. And the last reason that fan fiction is really good is because the fan fiction community will give you really good feedback. If you post your fan fiction online, you will have a lot of people from that fandom give you feedback on your writing, especially when it comes to plot holes and character consistency. So these two things can be really great if you're a beginning writer, because that kind of feedback will encourage you and give you the tools you need to become better. I started my writing career doing fan fiction because I wanted to practice writing romantic chemistry between characters. It was something I'd never really practiced before, and I couldn't find a lot of information at that time on how to do so. So I decided to write fan fiction as a way to practice. And if I had never done fan fiction, I would never know now that I really enjoy writing romance. And I wouldn't have gone on to publish a series of books based on the Otome format. So today we're going to write a fanfiction together based on Sylus from Love and Deep Space. If you aren't familiar with Love and Deep Space, it is a fully voiced dating sim / science fiction RPG where you play as a hunter that is in charge of destroying monsters. And while you are doing so, there are 4 male characters that give you their undying affection and devotion while also assisting you. Today we'll be making a fanfiction about Sylus, who is the newest addition to Love and Deep Space.
Even if you wanted to sell your soul, you still have to find someone who can pay the price.
He has stolen everyone's eyes, hearts, and other anatomy parts since his debut, so we're going to make a scene about him. So the other members have all had a few kissing scenes and also a few like intense kissing scenes, but Sylus is new, so he doesn't have any of those yet. He's just very mysterious and flirty and slightly suggestive. So I would like to show you how to write a first kiss scene using Sylus from Love and Deep Space. So we're going to practice character consistency with Sylus, and then we'll be practicing writing a first kiss scene. And after we write this piece, I'm going to show you how to edit. So my plan for today is just to write a scene. I'm not going to write an entire story. Now, I've made a video on how to arrange and organize scenes, and so we'll be taking from that a little bit. While we're planning for a scene, we're going to plan out which characters we will be using, as well as what's the mood of the scene, as well as what are the characters doing within the scene, and what is the goal of the characters within this particular scene. To answer these questions, we are going to make a scene about Sylus and the main character, and we're going to make it kind of a tense, sultry romance kind of scene. Now, nothing too racy, that's not really my style. So I'd like to keep the mood just slightly tense, but very romantic and kind of slower paced. And while I was playing the game, I kind of decided that Sylus is probably the type of guy to kiss with his eyes open. It's sort of a power move, but that was the only thing I had. That was the only thing I started with. So it took me a few days to figure out what kind of scene I wanted to write. But I decided since Sylus can cook, maybe we should do a kitchen scene. So now I had to figure out what are they going to do in the kitchen. So you could brainstorm a few ideas like, oh, midnight snack, a romantic dinner for 2, or a special birthday surprise. So I thought the birthday surprise would be a really awesome idea. And so I was thinking if it's a birthday surprise, it needs to be someone they both know. So I decided that I would choose the twins, and they'll be making a birthday cake for the twins. And when I think of Sylus, I think Black Forest cake, right? Because it has a lot of aphrodisiac ingredients. It's a mix of chocolate, cherries, cherry brandy, and whipped cream. So let's go ahead and get started on this fanfiction. So my goal for the rough draft is just to write as quickly as possible. It's probably going to be nonsense. It's not going to be very good. Probably the characters are going to be slightly off. Actually, come to think of it, what is the main character's name? Because I'm actually going to have to use a name. Does she have a name? Character doesn't have... There is no default name. Oh no! I'm not putting my name in there. That's too weird. I'm gonna ask ChatGPT to give me a name. Lyra. Saren means star. Orion is kind of fun. I think Orion is a good name for her. Orion Rose. Yeah, we'll just use Orion. That's a good one. Grab my bougie ice water. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just going to write a whole bunch of nonsense. So just for 45 minutes, I'm just going to free write. It is going to be trash. I'm going to go ahead and do a split screen so you can see what I'm writing as I'm writing it. And at the end of this, we will edit it together and I will give you some tips and tricks on how to write this kind of scene. And then I will post both the rough draft and the final draft on my blog. And so the scene is completed. I will come back in a couple days to look at it. I'm not going to do anything with it right now because when you do any sort of edits, you want to come back with a fresh energy and kind of a fresh perspective. It's also kind of a different point of view because as I create a story, I'm using my creative processes, and when I use my editing, I'm using a more logical process. So I can't do them within the same 24 hours. So I always recommend, if you are writing a short story, to wait a couple days, maybe even a week. This is just a scene, so I'm going to wait a couple days. But if you're writing a novel or anything like that, I would recommend waiting a month or two. So we'll come back to this in a couple days, and I will show you the editing process. I will go through why I write each sentence the way that I write it, and I'll show you how to write a kissing scene. All right, so it is now Friday night. I have given this story some time to ferment, and now I have forgotten most of it. So I'm going to go through the editing process with you, and I'm going to try and show you the editing process for a short story and how I control the pacing and the vocabulary and style of a romantic scene. All right, so I made a copy of my rough draft because I'm going to put up the rough draft, and then I'm going to put up the final draft so you can see the differences. Editor gives me a 90% score. Thanks, editor. My grammar's a 6. Well, because I'm not going for epic academic. Okay, so what I do usually, and this might be a little weird, is whenever I write a rough draft, I don't put any indents in the tabs. So it's just one big chunk. That way, whenever I'm editing and then I hit tab, that means that I've edited that paragraph. So at least if I'm working on a really big draft, like my latest novel already, probably about 400 pages. So when I'm editing, I know which places I've already edited in that massive document. I'm going to read through this real quick so I remember what I wrote. That way, if there's something at the end that I need to foreshadow in the beginning or put some details in the beginning, that way I can just kind of get an overall bird's eye view and we'll fix everything individually along the way. Okay, so I've read the whole thing. There are some parts I already don't like that I want to fix. But otherwise, this is a good base. So let's go through this line by line, and I'll show you how I edit it for the pace and style and tension. So first, I'm starting off the scene with some dialogue. This gives us some action into the scene, and that will grab the reader's attention. Dialogue is usually a really good way to start a scene, and I decided after the first paragraph to make this from Sylus's point of view. It just kind of naturally ended up that way. Oh, and just for the record, if we've forgotten already, I named the main character Orion Rose. It just kind of stuck. So how did I get roped into this? So we've finished that. Sylus pinched the bridge of his nose, looking at the splotches of flour and sugar on the kitchen floor. Splotches, that's probably the best word. Sugar on the kitchen floor. There was a hint of cherry alcohol in the air, mingled with cocoa. I think I want to do it that way because the cocoa smell is heavy. I want to make sure I put the adjective before the correct noun. Mingled with heavy cocoa. He didn't hate the smell, but he didn't want to be bothered. I don't like this line at all, actually. You don't want to be bothered with making anything. It's too nonchalant, kind of kills the romance. We don't really want to do that. We want to make this more tempting, more tension. So we have to amp that up. So what would be a better line? Something along the lines of, Sylus's kitchen is usually clean, but he really likes excitement. So I want to make a sentence that kind of brings some tension with those. This form of chaos was unfamiliar. Something he had not anticipated. He always anticipated. Should I make that a separate line? That makes it more dramatic if I make it a separate line. Yeah, a separate line is good. We'll keep it kind of dramatic. And then we'll kind of introduce the character. With Orion Rose, he could never anticipate everything. Something about her unpredictable nature was equally frustrating, as well as arousing feels like a really strong word. Intriguing, as it was intriguing. We're going to start with like a lower tension word and then kind of ramp it up instead of starting with a high tension word. Arousal is a high tension word. It's more sensual than we want to start with. All right, so those paragraphs are done. We can tab them. It's the twins' birthday. Too direct. It's too much telling. I want to change this. I'm not sure why you're complaining. Orion Rose replied. I can't spell, don't worry about it. Waving her wooden spoon at him. We're going to extend this conversation just a little bit. I've been the one doing all the work. You're the one who wanted to make a cake for the twins. Why should I be punished for your decisions? I would think you would want to reward your two loyal assistants for the year they've spent tracking down that, I don't know the protocourse names. Actually, let's just take that out completely. I don't even care what they did. It drags out the sentence longer than I want. So we're just going to do, I would think you would want to reward your two loyal assistants. I do reward them. I allowed them to live. Yeah, that seems like a very Sylus line. Now, I want to control the pacing a little bit more because we've had a lot of dialogue here. So we want her to respond to his joke positively because men love that. Everyone loves that, to be honest. I love it when men laugh at my jokes. Okay, so she's at this part in the story right now. Okay, while the cake is baking or cooling, prepare the cherries and syrup. She just makes it too early. That's fine. So how does she react? Let's think. Few possibilities. Direct smile, forced down smile, like she's trying not to smile. She could make a joke back. She could scoff at him with a smile. That seems more likely. Ryan scoffed, the soft lilt hidden in her voice. What's the word I want? Not pushing through, not seeping through, because that sounds like sewer water. Seeping is not good. Breaking through her forced agitation. Now we have to do something attractive, something that attracts him in this moment, something that he finds attractive. I want to describe her faking being annoyed, but clearly not. Her breath. There we go. Breaking through her breath as the, what is that? Hold to the side. Large. Another attractive feature. We need to build up the attractiveness. She rolled her eyes at him, large eyes sparkling with amusement, as she added vanilla to batter in the bowl in front of her. Okay, good. Now we have some action. Have I mentioned that they're in sugar on the kitchen floor? Okay, so I have mentioned that they're in the kitchen. See, I don't even remember something that happened a few sentences ago. Now we're going to change this. We're going to delete this. We're going to change this. Since we've had this long description, I'm not going to have her continue the same conversation because the reader will have to go back to remember what was said. So we're just going to start kind of a new topic change. Be useful, she replied, and find the cherry cognac. Cognac? I actually have no idea how to say that. Cognac.
Cognac.
Yeah, I've been saying that right for my entire life. Thank you. Just looking at it messed me up. Gave his most dramatic sigh. So he doesn't really feel that bothered by it, let's be honest. Yo, there is a thunderstorm happening outside. He wandered to the long cabinet above the stove and grabbed the cherry cognac. Now that I see that word, I'm never going to say it right. Bottle by its neck, swinging it as he approached her. I don't know if he would swing it. Would he swing it? If he's cocky enough, he might swing it. How often exactly? There we go. That just sounds more natural. How often exactly have you been sneaking in here and using my ingredients? That sounds more natural. She took it, pursing her lips at him. Haven't done it before. This is my first time. First time could have a couple of meanings, but this kind of works out. This is my first time because it'll be their first kiss. So kind of goes with the theme. And I should be more offended than perhaps. You've made food for the twins, but not for me. Okay, that sounds more direct. He leaned, places his elbow on the counter next to her, trying to get a response. That's kind of boring. I don't know how I feel that she was at school as always, keeping her eyes on the bowl of chocolate slush in front of her, not paying him any mind, not paying his objection any mind. He wasn't sure if he enjoyed her stoicism or if it irritated him. Okay, the twins will appreciate it, Orion replied matter-of-factly. And I wouldn't. I don't know what you'd appreciate. See, you know exactly what I would appreciate. Sylus reached his hand forward, brushing his fingertips against the inside of her wrist, because he does that quite a few times in the game. But we're going to italicize it. You know exactly what I would appreciate. Yeah, that gives it a little more tension. Sylus reached his hand forward, brushing his fingertips against the inside of her wrist. Orion stopped stirring the cocoa batter for a brief moment, but when Sylus, because we didn't mention Sylus' name, because Orion is the subject, but when Sylus pulled his hand away, she pretended nothing had happened. We're not going to say pretended because we are not in her head, we're in Sylus's head. But when he pulled his hand away, she continued stirring as if it had never happened. Okay, that would be better from Sylus's point of view. Okay. Do I still disgust you? Because in the game, they can't resonate, which I still don't quite understand. I guess resonate is like do a sci-fi bond. I don't know. You kind of bond together and then you become more powerful. But apparently she subconsciously hates him, according to the game, so they can't resonate. Do I still disgust you? He asked. At his question, she stopped stirring. Because stopped what completely? As if she was going to start stirring the batter again, but then stopped before completing the motion, as if she was about to. I don't know why, but about to just sounds better. She dropped the spoon against the side of the bowl. Disgust is a strong word, she said, her voice softer, as if she couldn't decide whether to whisper it to herself. Not as if. We don't want to use as if, because we're kind of projecting thoughts into another character's mind. So we're going to say he couldn't tell if she was whispering to herself or him. There we go. He leaned his back against the counter at the risk of getting flour all over his pants. That kind of takes away from the tension. It's funny, but it takes away from the tension. He leaned his back against the counter, keeping his head turned towards her. All this time and you still refuse to resonate with me. Turned towards her. I don't want to use turned again so soon. Actually, we just won't even put in an action tag. We don't need it. It's not a refusal. I can resonate just fine with others, but not with you. Okay, so Sylus's head is already turned, so we're going to... Orion turned him with dimmed eyes. She blinked at him twice and then turned back to her bowl of chocolate mush, stirring it a few more times before tossing the spoon aside on the counter. Care to share your thoughts with the class? Sylus asked. She grunted, leaning down under the counter, opening the doors of the cabinet and looking through. You can't look through the doors. And she's agitated, so she's going to swing open the doors. Swinging open the doors of the cabinet. She clattered the pans around, making an arrangement of noises that didn't answer his question. If there's something you want, Sylus says, perhaps I can provide it. She turned away from him. She turned her back towards him. It's a little stronger. To search through the other cabinets in the kitchen. Cake pans, she replied. Where do you keep them? He tried to keep his smile behind his lips as he approached her back, closing the distance between himself, her, and the cabinet. When she turned to face him, she gave a startled gasp at his proximity. He was nearly on top of her against the cabinets, cocoa from her hands and rose scent of cocoa from her hands and rose from herself, penetrating through him as he reached his hands up behind her. The wary confusion in her clear eyes amused him, and he soaked it in as he opened the cabinet behind her. He pointed first with his eyes and then with his fingers. Just fingers, because he's doing this. Cake pans, he said smugly. Changed the. Oh, I didn't do any of. I didn't do the thing that I said that I always do. I just got kind of wrapped up in this. Hold on. Make sure I have all the tabs. It's mainly because I have the red lines, so I just kind of forgot to do the tabs. He took 2 steps back, keeping his eyes on her back and hips as she reached. Okay, that's not as attracted as I want it to be. Keeping his eyes on the curves of her back and hips. And we could add an adjective to make it a little more interesting. We'll use deep, the deep curves of her back and hips as she reached for the cake pan. We're going to change this to italics because I do that for thoughts. Not every editor does that for thoughts. I don't know why, but tiny body for the power of punchy thought. I'm going to take out to himself because you can only think to yourself. It's a shame she doesn't know the true power she has. A greater shame that we're going to make this just one, and it's a greater shame that I can't draw it out of her. There we go. All right, we got page and a half left. She turned back to the bowl of batter, her eyes darting between him and the cake hands. What is this? Get away. You could help, you know. Why are you just watching me? I am helping, he replied. You just don't realize it yet. Do something more tangible then. Turn on the oven, 190. So 190, it's Celsius because this is a Chinese game. We're going to use 190 because that is Celsius while baking. Not many told him what to do. Not many what? Not many people told him what to do, but he could make an exception for the tiny, powerful woman in an apron. He didn't need to impress her really, but wasn't trying to impress her really. But forcing her to resonate hadn't helped. Hadn't worked. And turning on an oven was better than letting his thoughts wander. The tension isn't as strong as I want it to be. As she scurried, well, we'll add on the tension a little bit more as she scurried around the kitchen, beads of sweat starting to form around her rosy. What's another word for rosy? Rosy's really, really cliche. We use flushed, which is also a little cliche, but it's a little more sensual. Flushed. Beads of sweat starting to form around her flushed cheeks. Also, that works well with formed and flushed. To having 2 F's in a row formed around her flushed cheeks. Each of her curves, all of her curves, each is kind of weird. All of her curves. What do I want to say? All of her curves. Writing is not an easy process. I have the imagery, but I'm trying to like imagine and then word and then keyboard. I want to come back to her curves. Or maybe I don't. Maybe I'll just keep it like that. He turned on the oven he turned the oven on, setting it to 190. And that's kind of the indication of his being interested. Done, he said flatly. Anything else, chef? She had finished pouring the cake batter into the pans. That's kind of an important step. And was now beginning the cherry syrup. Not beginning. And was now attending to, because we want it kind of already happening, attending to the cherry syrup on the stove, in the pot on the stove. She dumped some of the cherry cognac into the pan. I have a couple short sentences to kind of raise the tension. Too many long sentences kind of give a peaceful feeling, so we want to heighten the tension a little bit, so we're going to use short sentences. She dumped some of the cherry cognac into the pan. Hot cherry filled the air, making him lick his lips. He licked his lips. Tell me when it's done preheating, she said. Her voice was too cold and distant for his liking, but forced and a bit strangled, which he did like. It spurred him to come a bit closer, to tease the coldness out of her. This is where we're kind of making our move here. You know, that's an expensive cognac, he said. Then it should make a great syrup. Let's show kind of her personality. She's kind of bland at the moment, so what's this move? She pouted she pouted, and pouting is kind of innocent. She pouted, but we want to show like a cute pout. But I don't want to say cutely because that kills the tension. She pouted with wide eyes, one shoulder coming up towards her, no, the lobe of her ear. The lobe of her ear to her earlobe towards her ear. We don't have to be fancy. He came closer. Let's do this, brushing past her to come to the other side with the boiling syrup. She stiffened. What stiffened? Her back, yeah, her back stiffened. Her back stiffened as he, what's the word I want? Kind of curved his steps around her from behind. Were her ears pink? Her lips were twitching more than usual as well. Let's cut out all this. He enjoyed the reaction. It was much better than stoicism was. He grabbed a spoon from the drawer and dipped it into the simmering, not boiling. Boiling's too hot. Simmering hot cherries. We're going to add the hot and fragrant because these two words make it more sensual. Fragrant cognac. Orion protested. Hey, that's... He slid the spoon in his mouth, slowly pulling it out as she watched him. The tingling sensation of cherry and alcohol bubbled on his tongue, his heart picking up speed in his chest as she looked at him with those wide, clear eyes. He pulled the spoon out and licked the curve of it. It's sweeter than I imagined, he said. This time her ears really did turn pink. He grinned as she turned her head away, suddenly feeling like a spider that had caught an off-guard fly in his web. All he had to do was reach his arms around her, and she would be his. He leaned down to meet his eyes, to bring his eyes closer to hers. Have you tasted it yet? He asked, keeping his voice low. Her lips parted, but she didn't answer. Her eyes locked with his. Without looking away, he dipped the spoon again in the simmering pot of sugar syrup, bringing it to her lips. And it's this paragraph. This paragraph, I don't know if I like him just right on her face. So, that was a terrible way to phrase that. I'm sorry. With the spoon, no, that doesn't help, does it? I don't like him touching the spoon to her lips. That would be a much more professional way of saying that. So I'm gonna have her take the spoon. We'll keep the pupils. Her pupils shifted and she brought her hand up to take the spoon handle herself. But he couldn't help but notice the slight shiver in her wrist, in her hand, not wrist, in her hand as she tasted the syrup herself. This kind of has a more sensual connotation, and that's fine. We want a tenser scene. This part, couldn't help but notice. We're going to change this though. He watched. Yep, he watched. Watched sounds better than observed. Watched sounds a little more intimate. He watched her throat move as she swallowed. His eyes then, after that, coming back up to her lips when she had finished. There was still some gloss of the syrup on her lips, taunting him. His feet moved forward on their own, pushing her further up against the counter. It's missing something, isn't it? Her tongue darted out of her mouth, licking at the gloss on her lips. Her ears were fire red now, the skin on her cheeks, not flushed because we used flushed earlier. Skin full and blushed. I don't even know if that's, full and blushed works. Missing what? She stuttered. And we're going to change this. He hoped her thoughts were as broken as her words. Sylus held back his smile, leaning forward to capture the little fly completely, perhaps a little salt. Before she could reply, he leaned all the way in, pecking her lips. His eyes stayed open. I need to describe this a little bit better. His eye, let's see. He leaned all the way in, pressing his lips to hers in a fleeting kiss. Cherry gloss from her mouth, watching the confusion on her face turn to shock, then to embarrassment. He was tempted to kiss her again, tempted to bring out that kaleidoscope of emotions all at once. But he resisted, wanting to. Oh, I had the words, I just forgot all of them. Wanting to enjoy this display he was showing him now. He licked his lips while his arms remained on either side of her, watching up close as the emotions tossed and turned in her eyes. Definitely salt, he said. It tastes much better now, don't you agree? To his pleasure, she didn't answer. The confusion clouded her eyes again, and he pushed off the counter with his hands to take a few steps back. He then looked at his fingernails. I'll keep the twins busy while you continue your cake mission, not adventure. She does missions, so that makes more sense. Sylus said, pretending he didn't notice Orion's shiver. Don't be so hasty in volunteering me for baking duty unless you want another surprise, sweetie, because he calls her sweetie. Orion's eyes suddenly focused. Then suddenly focused. Sylus prepared himself for an earful, but also didn't want to ruin the moment. She pointed a finger at him. Did you just, the oven is done preheating, he said. Let me know if there's any other desires. Double meaning. He swiped his thumb against his own bottom lip as he turned and walked out of the kitchen. This time, not holding back his grin. There we go. All right, now we have the finished version. And as you can see, there was a lot of edits, even for just a small scene. Why did my editor score go down? It's so much better now. What's wrong with you? I'm not trying to make a resume. I don't like AI helps. I don't mind ChatGPT for like brainstorming and stuff, but for some reason, in a billion years, they have not updated creative writing AI. And it still tries to make me write like the most boring person in existence. So this is now finished. We have our full draft. I'm going to post this on my blog. You can read the rough draft and the final draft. I will put a link for both. I will put that in the description. Tell me what you think of the fan fiction. What would you change, or what did you enjoy? Thanks for hanging out with me for this video. I think it was a longer one this time, but I really wanted to tell you the reasons why you should write fan fiction, how to write fan fiction, and then write a fan fiction with you. So give me a like or a subscribe if you thought any of this was helpful or just entertaining, and tell me what is the best fan fiction you have read in the comments. And with that, I will talk to you tigers later. Keep being beautiful beasts, and peace.